Mr. Chairman, we are now recording the meeting and streaming live to YouTube. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Rachel.
We have two more. Gigi more.
Well, good morning. Morning. And welcome to this Metro Plan Orlando CAC meeting. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'm Jeffrey Campbell, and I will be chairing the meeting today. This meeting is fully in person, so all committee members has been asked to be present here in Metro Plan Orlando boardroom. However, we will still have virtual participation for the public. I'll ask all committee members to please speak clearly and use your microphone so those joining us virtually will be able to hear. It's now time for our Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd like to ask Ms. Webster if she would do that for us. Sorry if I put you on the spot.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Webster. There are two public comment points in the meeting. Members of the public who are here in person and want to make a comment should submit a speaker card to Ms. Rachel Frederick. Those attending on Zoom who want to speak can use the raise hand feature on the Zoom screen. At the November Metro Plan Orlando board meeting, I let the board members know that the CAC is supportive of Vision Zero Action Plan initiative, particularly as it relates to our most vulnerable road issues. I also relayed some of the questions and comments members offered on the FDOT and Turnpike Work Program presentations and underscored our desire for more safety measures in bicycle and pedestrian facilities to be included. We have a very, very full agenda today. So I hope that we can move through this efficiently as possible. Remember that if you have a question that we can't get to, Ms. Horn here will make sure that we get the responses that we need. I'm going to say something a little later, but I just want to say to start with, it has been an honor and privilege to serve as your vice chair and as your chairman over the last 4 years. I once spoke about the passion of this group. And passion is a good thing. I believe for sure that the greatest call that we have is to serve, and to serve our community is very important. So thank you for allowing me to serve. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Mary Ann Horn. Mary Ann, if you can give us our agenda review and update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To all our committee members and those attending both in the room and online. In this format, we need a quorum of 16 members in the room to conduct votes. We're very close right now. As always, it is important to RSVP for our meeting so that we can prepare. There are still Zoom and YouTube options available for the public. As you know, we will elect 2024 CAC leadership later in the agenda, provided that we have that quorum. But before we get to that, I would like to ask that we have a round of applause for our current chair, Mr. Jeffrey Campbell, who has served ably for these past years. He has been our vice chair for 2 years during the pandemic, and before he was chair for the past 2 years. We really do appreciate Jeffrey's leadership, and we will present him with a tiny token of that appreciation at the final Metro Plan Orlando board meeting, which will be his final act as the chair when he represents you at the December the 13th board meeting. So thank you. It has been a pleasure. Last month, we advised you about public meetings taking place this week for the Sunshine Corridor, the proposed rail connection from the Orlando International Airport through the Convention Center, Southwest Orange County, and beyond. As part of their Transit Concept and Alternatives Review, which is known as the TCAR process, FDOT is hosting 3 in-person meetings along the corridor this week, open to the public. And we shared some information with you about that. There is a virtual meeting tonight. So if you missed the memo and you would still like to do something and you're not able to get out to iDrive, there is a virtual meeting tonight, and I plan to sit in on that one myself. You can see a recap of the information on this slide here, and the link to get you to the project page. We have shared that with you before. We have some happy news from our staff. Ms. Leilani Vayonga of our communications team welcomed a baby boy to her family in November. Woo! So here you see Leilani, Dad Nathan, and little Tavana Nathan, who looks like he's ready to go. Future pedestrian for sure. If it seems to you like we have had a lot of baby news recently, you're right. Tavana is the 3rd baby we have welcomed at MetroPlan Orlando in the past year. So is it any wonder that we are so committed to planning for the future of transportation? Congratulations to all. Now I would like to turn it over to Mr. Mike Wilson for our safety moment.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Good morning, everyone. So our safety moment this time around is looking at the holiday season and what might be a little different crash-wise and what we can do about it. So when we looked at the data, we compared December and January to the rest of the year. What we found that stood out was really just crashes involving darkness. Not surprising, you know, the days get shorter, and particularly in the evenings, more people are out moving about in darkness hours. And so you can see here an increase in 17% for KSI crashes and 23% for all modes. What was surprising was that we did not see an increase. In fact, it's a little bit lower for things like alcohol and drugs, speeding, and aggressive driving. Hopefully that means maybe all our messaging is getting out, maybe a little bit of social pressure from friends and family doing the job. So that's a good news side of it. And we can dive a little deeper into the darkness crashes. We look at vehicle occupants. You see a 19% increase for KSI, 36% for fatal crashes. Pedestrians actually not such a big jump because they're just at risk, you know, year round. But as you see, about 24% increase for KSIs. Bicyclists is where we see a really big increase, about a 1/3 increase for KSI, and you see an 85% increase for fatal crashes during that period. So our takeaways, you know, the message, particularly for motorists, is slow down. You know, you're going to need more time to see, react, and brake at night. For bicyclists, using headlights and taillights is essential. Reflectors are simply not sufficient for being visible, because most crashes happen such that a bicyclist is not in front of the headlights until a second or so before impact. And then if you're a pedestrian, give yourself more time to cross. It can fool you when a vehicle is coming at high speed from a great distance at night. You can easily misjudge the speed of the vehicle. So give yourself a little more time than you think you need. And that concludes my safety moment for this month. Thank you.
Yeah. Actually, I do.
Oh, okay.
If I could ask, are there what steps are being taken to deal with, thank you for turning me on here. Regarding the reflectors, are there any policy measures, you know, to where we can, you know, step up enforcement to ensure that, you know, people are actually using lights and not just reflectors, or what's the status of that?
I mean, occasionally some local law enforcement will do some campaigns, either, you know, stopping people. You know, lights are really quite cheap these days, you know, LEDs. So, you know, that's a campaign I think we can look into helping all of our local law enforcement get into, because simply handing out a light, headlight and tail light and strapping it on, yeah, it makes a huge difference.
So is it more of an ask, like, please do this, as opposed to a tell, like you have to do this because it's codified in law?
It is the law. And so, but it's always better if we can help people than just punish them. Because, you know, very often those who are without are probably doing so because, you know, they can't afford it. So.
Thank you.
We have, I think, 2 changes to the printed agenda in terms of personnel. Ms. Laura Balk will be presenting on the EV readiness study instead of Mr. Hill, and Mr. Panza, am I correct that you, Patrick, Panza will be presenting instead of Emily Hanna for Best Foot Forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Rachel Frederick to call the roll.
Thank you. Good morning. Battler. Here. Bobinger.
Here.
Bolton. Bosley.
Present.
Campbell. Sintron Medina. Coleman. Coloco Masso. Polon. Council. Here. Davis. El Badri. Gus. Henry. Lopez. Mormon. Mott.
Present.
Mueller.
Present.
Niesman. O'Hanlon. Pereira.
Present.
Peters.
Present.
Pigram.
Present.
Pizzo.
Present.
Rump. Salas. Shaw. Sabia.
Present.
Stevens.
Present.
Webster.
Present.
White. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the roll call. We do have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Frederick. We will now hear public comments on action items. Do we have anyone online who would like to speak to any of the action items? If so, please use the raise hand function on your screen or press *9 on your phone keypad. When we call your name, the host will unmute your microphone. You will see a button pop up that says the host wants to unmute you. Accept the prompt to activate your microphone. We ask that you provide your name and address for the record, and please hold your comments to 2 minutes. Are there any comments at this time?
Mr. Chair, we do not have any hands raised on the virtual side.
Do we have anyone present in the boardroom today who wish to make comment on action items?
We have received no comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, very good. Moving to action items. We have 4 action items today. As I said, we have a full agenda, but 4 action items. And our first is the approval of our minutes from our October 25th meeting. I'll ask for a motion and a second and open the floor for any discussion. Stand for a motion.
I move to approve. Dan Stevens.
Okay, we have a motion, Stephen, and a second by Ms. Council. Any further discussion? Any questions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you so very much. Our next item is the election of 2024 CAC officers. The CAC Officer Selection Committee has met and has a slate of officers for us. First, I will ask for the report. Mr. Bobing, are you reporting for us? And you ready?
Always. Mr. Chair and fellow members of the committee, of the Community Advisory Committee, the CAC Officers Selection Committee met this morning to discuss the slate of candidates that lead to the CAC in 2024. Members of that subcommittee are myself, Mr. Brian Coleman, and Ms. Teresa Mott. Our nomination for the chair is Dr. Stevens. This is a CAC member is well qualified to serve in this position because he brings great experience to the board and can offer great leadership. Can we continue?
No. Okay. So at this point, what we'd like to do is, do we have any nominations from the floor for the position of chair? Okay, with that, I will ask for a motion to accept Dr. Stevens as our incoming chair for 2024. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion, any questions? Hearing none. Congratulations, Dr. Stevens.
We had two members show interest in the vice chair position. Ms. Pizzo and Mr. O'Hanlon both offer great experience to the board and have years of experience. Our nomination currently for the vice chair position is Ms. Judy Pizzo. The CAC member is a well-qualified position, will bring us great diversity to the board and great experience to our community.
Okay. Very good.
You may finish the bottom part. Okay. Bylaws require the candidates for chair and vice chair to live in different counties, and our slate fulfills that requirement. The candidates on our slate volunteer at leadership at CAC, and we appreciate their willingness to serve. It is observed at this meeting that we have nobody, I'm sorry, having a problem reading today, not enough Cokes. We have not had anybody who lives in Osceola County volunteer for leadership for more than 5 years. We surely urge all members from Osceola County consider offering their services at the next available opportunity. This concludes our report, Mr. Chair, and we urge the Community Advisory Committee to elect the slate of 2024 committee leaderships. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Bobinger. Do we have any nominations from the floor for position of vice chair? And now I can see.
So for Osceola County, she is a nonprofit champion. She knows how to get communities going. She knows how to really, what she is boots on ground. So when it comes to community leaders, grouping up with the community itself, I think that she's the person for the job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Council, are you interested in that? Okay. Okay, in this situation, what we will need to do is call the roll on each one. Okay, Mr. O'Hanlon. What did you say? Okay. So we have two names vying for the position of vice chair. One that the nomination committee has put forward and one from the floor. Did you have a question?
Yes, our question is, Ms. Council representing Osceola?
Yes.
You are, okay. Perfect.
Okay, so let's do this and let's go in alphabetical order. Okay. So we'll poll the committee for each one, and someone who will keep the count for us.
Rachel.
Okay, Ms. Rachel, that's very good. Okay. For the position of vice chair, Mrs. Council.
Battler. Bobinger. Bolton. Bosley.
Pizza.
Campbell.
Pizzo.
Coleman. Council. Davis. El Badri. Gus. Henry. Lopez. Mormon.
Council.
Mott.
No.
Muller.
Council.
Niesman. O'Hanlon. Pereira.
Council.
Peters. Pigram.
Pizzo.
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 Salas. Shaw, Sabira,
Council.
Stevens,
Council.
Webster,
Council.
White. Did I miss anybody?
Rachel. Mr. Chairman, for clarity, Teresa Mott, I voiced no with the understanding that the question was a or no.
You
So for
understood it
tally
absolutely
purposes,
correctly.
yeah, so for tally purposes, Pizio.
I was gonna go back and clarify that because I heard how that got off.
Yeah.
How did that vote go? How did we do on the count on that? Well, okay. Okay. Seeing how we have a 12-8 split, I don't think it's necessary to call the roll again. Did you say 12?
20?
Do we have 20 here? We needed
No.
16.
We have to have at least
We
16.
had to have 16.
There's been more join while the meeting.
We have 20 present,
We do.
so 8. Okay. Okay, I will need a motion at this point.
Motion.
Moved, RJ.
And we need a second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to take Ms. Council as our vice chair. Any further questions or discussion? Congratulations, Ms. Council. Congratulations. Would either of you like to say anything at this point? Would you like to say something, Dr. Stevens?
Yes, I would. To be clear, while I teach at UCF downtown, my main office is actually UCF Valencia Osceola down in Kissimmee. And I know the question was raised as far as having representation from Osceola County. I actually was urban planner for Osceola County for 5 years. I'm very familiar with Osceola County, happenings, whatever. So, but as far as it pertains to this committee, I look forward to serving this committee for the next, at least the next year. Is it a 1-year term or is it a 2-year term, or how does that work?
The way that the bylaws specify, Dr. Stevens, is that you're elected for a 1-year term, but the chair has the option of being the chair again. So
Right.
it's a 2-year term limit.
So you guys can kick me out after a year is what I'm thinking. So, but I do look forward to serving you folks, continuing to serve you folks, and continuing to serve the community. So thank you very much for your vote of confidence. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Ms. Council.
I'm truly surprised. I'm truly grateful. I love this group. I come across worlds just to make it over here and be a part of this and be a part of Vision Zero. I hope that I can fill the shoes as well as our previous vice mayor and our chair over here, the previous chair and vice chair and chair. Thank you so much. Everything I do in the community, as Ms. Gus said, I do it with a passion. I do it for the community. So serving on this board and now serving as vice chair, I am super excited. Thank you so much.
Congratulations again, Ms. Council. Did someone have a question over here?
About sour grapes. She was given an introduction of her background and what she does. And I don't know how many people here know me that either voted or voted against me, but congratulations nonetheless. And I wish you the best.
Thank you, Ms. Pizzo. Okay, moving on. Next, we're considering a recommendation to approve updates to the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Ms. Taylor Laurent of Metro Planner London will provide the information. Ms. Laurent, you have our attention.
Thank you so much. So we'll go ahead and get started with the proposed revisions to the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan. As I walk through these different revisions, you're going to hear two terms very frequently. The first being modification, which represents a small or minor change to the plan, whereas an amendment represents a larger or more significant change. Now, while these two terms are very different, we're going to be treating them the same today and taking them through the exact same process. I'll be presenting both modifications and amendments to you and ultimately asking for your recommendation of approval of the revisions. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and start walking through them. There is more information about these revisions in your agenda under tab 2, if you want to see any additional information. So to begin, we're starting with an annual modification that we have that we refer to as our TIP refresh. This is an annual modification that we've done the past several years and are continuing today to update the first 5 years of our Metropolitan Transportation Plan for consistency with the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP. So this is really just a planning consistency update, and there are no impacts to any existing project cost feasibility. Our second item is an amendment to include a federal discretionary raise grant that was awarded to the City of St. Cloud for their 10th Street project. With the inclusion of this project, there are no impacts to existing project cost feasibility. Item 3 is also an amendment, this time to identify 7 state appropriations that were awarded to different projects throughout our 3-county region. They are listed up on the slide for your reference. With the incorporation of these projects and the designation that they've received state funding, there are no impacts to other existing project cost feasibility. Item number 4 is a administrative modification to specifically call out bicycle and pedestrian projects that are potentially eligible for Sun Trail program funding. Now, this is just an administrative change to the project description to showcase that eligibility, and there are no impacts to existing project cost feasibility. Item 5 runs along in the same vein. This is a similar modification to locally funded projects to identify those few projects that are also potentially eligible for Sun Trail program funding. So with this minor change, again, there are no impacts to existing project cost feasibility. Modification 6 is to adjust the State Road 417 widening project limits, shortening the project ever so slightly to end at North Reinhardt Road. And with the change to the project limits, while it's a slightly shorter, smaller project, the costs did not change. So there are ultimately no impacts to existing project cost feasibility. Then our last item is a series of amendments and modifications, all meant for planning consistency with our local partner plans throughout the region and per requests that have been received. Now, I will go through and explain kind of what it falls under this item, but there are no impacts to existing project cost feasibility. So in general, item 7 includes some revisions to include MTP ID numbers to our regional programs to make them a little easier to identify and navigate through within the plan itself. There were some updates to project names and limits for consistency with the TIP, as well as the FDOT 5-year work program. A few minor revisions to project limits to better identify logical termini, so where these projects start and end, to better reflect how they will be implemented in the near future. Then there were some duplicate project needs that were identified, or duplicates that were incorporated into other ongoing projects. So those have been removed to remove those duplications. And I did receive a few questions about what that looks like in the document, so I do have an example. The first on the left is kind of showing what was in the plan. So you can see the State Road 414 widening project was included twice under 2 different MTP ID numbers, so listed as 2 projects. The proposed revision is to remove MTP ID number 2209. That's what's shown in your agenda under tab 2, leaving us with the 1 single project notation under ID number 1007. So just removing the duplications there. And there were a few additional revisions requested by the TAC and TISMO committees at their meeting last week. The first being on MTP ID number 8114, the Old Lake Wilson Road. There was a Scrivener's error in one of the project costs, so that is being corrected. Then there was another typographical item identified on project number 5030. There's a State Road 434 trail bridge or tunnel being proposed, trail tunnel, and not the State Road 424. So that will be corrected as well. So unless there are any questions about the proposed revisions as I presented them, I will ask for your recommendation of approval of the revisions to the 2045 MTP. Are there any questions?
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Now we're ready for questions. Mr. O'Hanlon.
Yes, on number 6 adjustment, is that being shortened because the Wekiva Parkway extension is actually taking care of that? Because we're not gonna have an 8-lane road go to 4 lanes back to 8 lanes, are we?
I don't believe so. I was told it was for logical termini to make sure that it ends at the right spot.
Well, we
That's
didn't
something I can
ask
follow
that,
up with the
otherwise that
Turnpike.
change is ridiculous.
Something we can follow up with the Turnpike about to clarify that question.
Mr. Sabila.
Sorry, thank you. I was actually gonna also ask about that change, also the fact that it was shortening, the project being shortened, but there was no adjustment to costs. So I assume that costs would go down if the project was being shortened as well. But yes, the concern of the shifting of lanes and the continuation of traffic flow is another concern.
So the question has to do with the, oh, okay.
Thank you.
Chelsea Fine with the Turnpike. So the adjustment of the limits was actually to match with the Wekiva Parkway Phase 8. Yeah, so our project will end at Reinhardt Road and theirs will pick up at Reinhardt Road. But there are no project impacts to scope or to the prices included in the in the MTP.
Thank you, Mr. Fine. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
Is there any way that we can hypertext a link to the different projects and then get the agendas in email so we can actually click and see what the projects relate to?
There was a link included in the summary of plan revisions that was included in your agenda packet to go directly to the MTP document with the proposed revisions
Then I must have
incorporated.
just
So it's in detail.
Mhm. And it is up on the project website, on the MTP website as well.
Okay.
Okay, yes, let's go.
Molly, concerning the duplicate needs slide part, can you just go over that one more time for me? Because what I want to know how many duplicate needs, where there are a lot, and what's the process to catch these duplicates? You know what I mean? Thank you.
Yes, so of the proposed duplicate needs, so what you're seeing in your summary of plan revisions, it's page 5 of the attachment that was included under tab 2 in your agendas. There were about 22-ish that have been incorporated into other ongoing projects or were identified as a duplicate need. Again, what you're seeing is the list of duplicates that are being removed in this overview of plan revisions, not the original project that is remaining as it is within the current plan. So these duplicates are identified through our ongoing planning work. So as we're moving forward, implementing some projects, changing project scopes as we're getting closer to funding them, that's when there are sometimes changes to the limits and termini where they're starting and ending. And that's when we start seeing some of these potential duplications. As we notice those come up, we clear them out of the MTP to make sure that we're not duplicating any project resources.
Okay, good, Mr. Coleman. Okay. Ms. Gus.
I just wanted to circle back on the federal funding for the Sunrail, if you could clarify that for me.
The Sun Trail program?
Trail,
So that is the state funding program, back up. State funding program to help develop trails throughout the state of Florida. As part of the eligibility process for making that funding available to our bicycle and pedestrian type projects, we need to specifically call out and identify them as eligible for that program in a prioritized planning document. So our MTP is a listing of needs throughout our 3-county area, and it is prioritized based on the methodologies identified through the 2045 plans development. So by specifically adding into the project description that it's potentially eligible for these Sun Trail program funds, we're making sure that we're making these projects eligible for the most funding possible throughout the state.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion, we have a second, we have discussed, so it's now time to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposes? Motion carries. Ms. Lauren, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we are asked to recommend approval of the 2024 Metro Plan Orlando Board and Committee Meeting Calendar. Ms. Mary Ann Horn of Metro Plan Orlando will provide the information. Ms. Horn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Here is before you the proposed meeting calendar for 2024. The thing that I would bring to your attention is the month of May. We have routinely struggled around the month of May because with all of our committees, we run into the holiday on one side or the other. For this particular calendar, we have elected to put the CAC, CAC, and TSMO meetings all in one week as they usually fall. And that means that in that one instance, this committee would meet on, I believe, the 5th Wednesday instead of the 4th Wednesday. There's 5 Wednesdays there. So we would meet after the holiday instead of before. So that would be the only change from the norm of our 4th Wednesday, other than the usual change in December when we meet at the beginning of the month to avoid holidays. All these dates are in your agenda at the moment, and you can commit those in pencil until the board approves or changes this calendar at their December 13th meeting.
Move approval.
We have
Second,
a motion and a second. State your name, Mr. O'Hanlon, and the other one came from.
Bovenger.
Over here. Okay,
Bovenger.
very good. Any questions?
I see some notes there, the asterisks.
Though, yes, those are the meetings that do not fall on the prescribed day. For instance, that's where our committee is, it said that we will meet on the 4th Wednesday of the month. In this case, we would be meeting on the 5th Wednesday, so it's just moved. And that's what all of those signify. They have been moved around holidays or other events.
Very good. Any other questions regarding the calendar? Okay, it's a voice vote. Are we ready? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposes? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Horn. Okay, moving to our presentations. We have 4 presentations today, so I'll ask all members present to be mindful of our time. Members, if you have a question for the presenter, please stand your name card on the end. We will call those who have questions at the end of the presentation. Our first presentation is a status update on Metro Plan Orlando's Vision Zero Action Plan. Mr. Mike Wilson from Metro Plan Orlando will present, and you have our attention.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to kick off our Vision Zero update with our new video, kind of an overview video of the program to sort of put everything in perspective.
Well, I have been in Central Florida for 24 years. I have a lot of friends that have been in accidents, like really bad accidents. One minute you can be here and the next minute you can be gone. I was in an accident and the car just flipped out. My mom got injured, the back of her neck. It had a negative effect on us.
Just a train, you know, the train, there's a car right in front of us and then boom, ow.
Fue un accidente bastante grave. Pasé por 2 cirugías. Aún estoy en muchos tratamientos. y actualmente todavía no me he recuperado del todo. Las lesiones que deja un accidente son garrafales.
I had a couple good friends die from a drunk driver. One was like a grandfather to me.
My sister's husband was killed in a car accident, and it affected not only her life, but her children's life, their grandchildren's lives.
My youngest nephew was killed recently, earlier this year, in a bicycle versus pickup truck. It was such a shock to hear of his death. We do love him. We miss him.
Just made me think about my life a little bit more. That could have been me, it could have been anybody.
Okay, people here they're not everybody, but there are enough crazy drivers. They're in a hurry. They don't care. They'll run red lights.
Well, you got to be cautious. You got to have your eyes all around you.
Some of the streets don't have crosswalks or crossing guards, more or less. It's just kids' safety is really my concern in Central Florida.
There's 3 different memorials that I see. It's a young man who was on a skateboard at 6 a.m. that ended up being killed by a car. And almost right across the street from where he died, a 77-year-old man was killed on a bicycle.
And people should be concerned about that.
If there were no more pedestrian accidents or traffic accidents at all, a lot more people will be outside enjoying life.
Where people's not afraid to walk down the street, cross the street, ride their bike.
Be great. Be great.
And people would just be happier, honestly, just going outside, having fun with their families.
Si me imagino el mundo si nadie muriera en un accidente, pues sí, sería muy, muy bueno.
With no accidents, that'd be wonderful.
I imagine the world would be an incredible place because when you see those markers and you think of the folks, what futures they had or could have had, what could have they contributed to our community, to our society, to their families.
And you start thinking about these things and wonder if there could have been something that could have prevented that from happening.
Everybody want to live their life. Everybody want to enjoy freedom. Everybody want to, just live life to the fullest.
Yeah, so it's good to remember. Yeah, and kudos to our
That was very good.
public outreach folks for putting this together. It's good to remember that behind every one of the numbers that I share all the time, there's a lot of stories. Yeah. The link for the video you can see up there, and of course the link to our Vision Zero Central Florida website, which I will be featuring in a little bit. So in this presentation, I'll be going over our high injury network, a little more information on that, talking about some of our public engagement efforts, a little bit on the countermeasures work that we're doing, looking at how do we improve all of our policies, and then how do we move forward with all of this. So first off, our high injury network, give you a little bit of information on that last time, and we will have a handout that we're producing for the board that we'll email to all of you probably by the end of this week, certainly before our board meeting next week, so that you'll actually have on hand the list of the roads and intersections that are on the network. But as you can see here, some more data on the high injury network. It represents 258 centerline miles over our entire region. You see nearly 60% of those are FDOT roads, 30% county, and almost 11% are local government streets. As mentioned before, 41% of our deaths are occurring on 2% of our roads. Some other key points about this: the average posted speed on high injury networks, 43 miles per hour. And the average 85th percentile speed, so that, speed at which 85% or lower of vehicles are moving, is 53 miles per hour. More than half of our high injury network runs through areas that are classified as disadvantaged communities, while only about a quarter of our population is classified as such, so they're highly overrepresented. So public engagement, as I mentioned, our Vision Zero site, and we'll pull that up here and give you a little bit of overview of what we have on that site. So the home page here, and I will first go to our really wow page, which is our dashboard, which will take a little bit to load because of a whole lot of crash data coming in here. And so what this map-based page will show you is all of the crashes for our area for 2018 through 22, and then you can filter down by severity, by jurisdiction. So for example, here I can zoom into Altamont Springs, and then I could also, if I wanted to, let's say, look at specific modes, I could look at pedestrian and bicycle crashes, and then you can zoom in and get, as you zoom in, you'll see that the red crash marks are the KSI crashes, whereas the white circles are other lesser injury crashes. And as you click on all of these mode filters, then you notice the numbers up here on the top change. So this shows not only the number of those crash types, but what percentage of the entire region's KSI crashes they represent. And so you can also look at equity areas. We don't include limited access facilities as a default, but it's something you can look at and turn on and off. And then also we exclude private roads and parking lots from our analysis from the basic, but that is something you can turn on if you want to include those numbers. And then you'll get some data over here on the side showing what kind of speeds and number of lanes are associated with the crashes in the area that you've filtered for, and what types of crashes are showing up. For bike and ped, it just shows you bike and ped, but for others, it would be other crash types. So there you can see if I went to all crashes, it shows all the different crash types. So anyway, plethora of information for you to explore and share. And then another really important component of this is our ability to reach out to the public and gain their information, going beyond the crash data to what kind of experiences are you having out there on the road? What are you seeing in the way of what's the impacts of the environment, impacts of behavior on our safety issues? This page can be easily translated. We have Spanish and Haitian Creole, so you can click at that link up on top, and so it changes all of that. But as you go through, you can select what type of problem you want to address, what modes are relevant, and then there's a map where you can actually plot the location of the problem. We want people to focus on the high injury network, but they can put their plot point wherever they see a problem. And then providing more details with text, they can provide a photograph. And this is smartphone compatible, so it's easy to read on that. And so it's very easy to just take a picture and upload it from your phone, and then other information. So people can submit as many of these as they like. And then a general resources area where information, for instance, on the task force, our partners, events, etc. All kinds of useful information there. All right, let's jump back out. And so some other things that we're working on, we did our first speaker series. Many of you participated in that. Fact sheets are being developed for all of the jurisdictions as to an explanation of what Vision Zero is and what the relative impacts are at those different jurisdictional levels. Developing a local elected officials guide so the elected officials have a better idea of what their role should be to help move the Vision Zero process along. Local agency events are being developed and we've already had a few hit the ground. We are working on a safety summit with FDOT scheduled for the end of January, 31st. And you'll be getting more information about that before the end of the month. And collecting personal stories. One of the groups that we work with is called Driving Down Heartache. It's a separate site, but it's an opportunity for people to share their personal stories. It just helps us all to share the importance of what we're doing. There's an example of one of the fact sheets. So a good amount of data and explaining the process and how people can get involved. We are working on a countermeasures handbook. Right now, finishing up the engineering side of that. So there are about 100 of these countermeasures. Each one has a panel like this that just generally explains what the countermeasure is, what the benefits are, what the relative rough costs are, and you know, just to help people understand what's all available and what might be relevant for their particular problem area. Now, we're also working on non-engineering countermeasures guide that will look at things like education, enforcement, other behavioral issues, as well as other policy things such as, you know, what's the impact of land use, for example, on safety. We've been doing a benchmarking process of our own internally, as far as looking all the relevant plans and programs and policies and what they might, how they might need to change to do the best job of supporting the Vision Zero goals. And then we are encouraging all of the local governments to take that same process and apply it to their own local government plans and policies. At our last task force meeting, we talked a little bit about crash reduction scenarios. How aggressive do we want to be? Can we be at reducing our crash problem? And, you know, weighing that against what we think is realistic and what we think is affordable. And so that's an ongoing conversation that will eventually we'll have some, you know, recommendations for the final plan. And then next steps, we're looking at the high injury network, not only our own, but all the subsequent, you know, lower local networks to see where they overlap, seeing what other projects are already in the pipeline that may have an impact so that we can either take advantage of those or sort of strike them off of the priorities because they're being addressed. Looking at things like near-term quick build opportunities, the sort of thing that wouldn't necessarily show up in our TIP or in a capital improvement program, but that could still be very cost-effective and useful. And then looking at the overall costs and available funding, again, at all levels, so to get some idea of what we can achieve in the coming years. And then looking at what are the good candidates for the next phase of Safe Streets for All funding, because now there are federal funds for the implementation side. We've got the federal funds for the planning side, but when we want to build something, there's also funding available there. Also, still to come are developing the Vision Zero resolutions, again, at every level, setting targets, intervals for evaluating, and how do we really engage all aspects of the community on an ongoing basis. Once again, our project schedule, so you see we were here in that countermeasures and policy review, and we, as the new year comes, we'll be looking at identifying prioritized projects and strategies. So where we are now, coming up, January 16th is our next task force meeting. All of the local plans are underway. As you saw, the hub site is up and running, and there will be more coming to that site. The high injury network will be on there soon. And so, as I said, we're identifying countermeasures and policies. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
One real quick question, because I know we got to really move fast. Does the statistics include any incidents or injuries or deaths caused by pursuit? Legal, at least.
It's not necessarily called out in the data. Yeah, I don't recall seeing that as a crash type.
I don't know if it would be included anyway, but just
Right.
wondered.
I mean, I have seen crashes when I do I review bike and ped crashes. I have seen some crashes that involve pursuit. Sometimes of a bicyclist, sometimes of a motorist that results in a crash that then injures a pedestrian or cyclist. So they do still receive a crash report, even though it's also a criminal matter. So, but again, we don't have good data on that.
Okay. Over here, Mr. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Mike, I guess mine specific question, as you guys are discussing engineering countermeasures and engineering specifically, from what I understand, and I don't know how true this is for every local municipality and broadly at an MUTCD level, for a traffic signal to be warranted where there currently isn't one, you have to have 5 events occur within a 12-month span to justify a signal, meaning if 4 people are killed at this location every 12 months, it's not justified yet because it hasn't met the 5 incident criteria. That could be a strike or the death of an individual. It seems like that's a very low bar to kind of raise. So while that may not align nationally, like how are those discussions going when we are, from a funding standpoint, trying to align nationally, but those approaches may be more car oriented versus pedestrian oriented?
Yeah. I'm not a traffic engineer, so I'm not real knowledgeable when it comes to warranting of traffic signals. There's more to it than crashes. There's also what are the relative traffic volumes of the main street and the cross street. And there are downsides to traffic signals as well. So we have to be careful about an implementation. There's a lot being discussed, a lot of revision happening on the MUTCD to shift it more toward the interests of non-motorists, because it has had such a motor vehicle bias over the years. And a lot is happening in the pedestrian realm. I serve on the national committee and participate in both the bicycle and pedestrian committees of that. And so there's a lot of work being done to improve signal warrants when it comes to supporting pedestrians and cyclists.
Mr. Bobinger, you're recognized.
Great video, thank you. A couple questions on the accidents and the deaths and whatnot, and people injured. The video really is an eye-opening thing that, the agencies all need to have. It really ought to be hitting the airwaves on TV to wake up all of these drivers that can do most of their job on the street in their cars, and they're not paying attention to people in crosswalks. And what percentage of the injuries and deaths are that do occur in a crosswalk, that do occur in areas that don't have sidewalks? And we have so many municipalities and agencies around that have a lot of streets that are main thoroughfares through their cities, and there's no sidewalks for anyone safely to walk down that street or even get to a Lynx bus stop. So it's, you have people crossing the street and in the middle of the night, not in crosswalks, getting hit, getting killed. That really is the thing that we need to wake people up on. Most of these agencies and municipalities is we can keep building roads all day long. And I know Tom hates that to be heard because we don't need to be spending a bunch of money on roads. We need to have sidewalks. We need to have safe bicycle paths that will reduce this and drop these KSIs and these numbers drastically if someone has a safe way to get to where they need to get to. And that seems to be really need to be a major focus on the top of the hill of all this money that gets spent nationally and statewide on what we do for roads. I mean, I travel every morning on a road that has no sidewalks and I see people walking in the street and it's pitch dark out and they get hit. And, get hit waiting for a bus, get hit trying to cross the road. And, it never ends. And the problem is it's seen, it's forgotten, and someone just keeps driving.
I want to say thank you to Ms. Pizzo for sharing your story in that video, and Mr. Mueller as well. Yeah, thank you very much. You recognize.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, if I could follow up on, because you were asking about sidewalks. Actually, where we find the highest frequency of serious pedestrian crashes is on roads that have complete sidewalks on both sides. Not to say that there isn't a need, and we are fulfilling that with our sidewalk gap program. So we've identified those gaps and we are looking at the crash data. But when we look at crashes overall, it's because getting across the road, particularly at night, particularly on high-speed roads, that's our top pedestrian safety concern or problem. So I wanted to clarify on that.
Make it safer for everybody as well.
Right.
Sorry to move past you so fast, Mr. Bowling. Mrs. Pizzo, you recognize.
Okay. Incredible amount of data coming from my traffic planning history. It's almost overwhelming. My initial thoughts as you were presenting was, who were you marketing this to? Who is actually going to be using this tool? Because it is a tool. And I saw where you are going to be having your public outreach and such. I'd also encourage, and I'm sure they're going to be there, or the various engineering firms and such that would utilize this. How are you going to keep this up to date? How is this going to continue to be a living document of sort? The volume of data is astronomical. I know what you put into it, and I'm in awe. Congratulations on that. But you've got to keep this up to date. And I know that's going to be a daunting task.
Yeah, and we've developed processes for that. So all of the processes for taking the data out of Signal 4 and joining it with our environmental roadway network data, everything that's been done up to date, those have all been documented so that whoever comes in subsequent years can replicate what we've already done. And so, yeah, we're already working the processes for this to be an ongoing process, ongoing system.
Mr. O'Hanlon, you recognize.
I've got two items. I really want to address Jeffrey with the one, and I'm not contradicting what he's saying. But I want to thank our local governments and FDOT, because the amount of sidewalks that we have here in good places in Central Florida is better than the other 49 states in the country. So we do have shortcomings here, but our local officials here do a far better job than they do in the entire rest of the country. So I feel sorry for those other 49 states, okay? But we can still do better here. So I agree with that, but I want to congratulate the folks because they're going to take the hits, but there's people doing a pretty good job right now. What I originally put my card up for was to say that I am not part of Mike's statistics. I was in Orange County Thursday, corner of your territory there, Tanner Road and Lake Price. It's a four-way intersection with a traffic light. I'm taking a left turn. Light goes green. I'm not driving, of course, my car is. My car starts pulling out into the intersection, slams on full regen, full brakes, and the cars behind me start honking the freaking horns. What the hell are you doing? And a red pickup truck, old red pickup truck, scoots by at 60 miles an hour, who would have totally taken him. So I know you guys don't like these self-driving cars, but these self-driving cars, believe it or not, are going to get us to net zero because there will be no accidents. And I'm going to grant you, it's going to take a while for this to all come out and everybody have self-driving cars, but it's coming and they're just amazing.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Mr. Ballard.
My question is, kind of relating back to what you were saying, is do you have a category in cause of accident? Is it driver error? Is it pedestrian error? Is it equipment failure? Is that a category that you have in your data?
Yeah, so there are general crash types, and that's actually on the dashboard. There's generalized crash types that come from the crash report. Rather than driver error or pedestrian error, it's, what is the contributing cause? So it could be failure to yield or what have you. And particularly for pedestrian and bicycle, we have highly detailed, much better than other metro areas, of specifics of pedestrian and bicyclist behavior, position, direction, things like that, that are very useful. But I want to, point out again, this, the difference with Vision Zero, it's important to understand behavior and to help you identify countermeasures. But when you start focusing on fault, it distracts you from focusing on all the other factors that come into play. Fault is good for the courtroom. But what we need to know is, we can use it as one factor, but we have to look at all the other factors as well. Because human beings are always going to make mistakes, and how can we mitigate those mistakes?
Okay. Ms. White, did you have your card up?
No.
I thought so. Okay. Ms. Gus, you recognize.
So I have something to pick off for everybody. I would like to start though to say that the video was beautiful. I really enjoyed that you put it in English and Spanish. I think that was, I think that that's what we need in this community. And it's something that's going to touch the hearts of everybody. I do feel like when it comes to your public outreach, the government agencies are extremely important, but the baseline, they really care about, we really care about the people who are right next to us, and the local nonprofits, anybody, even any kind of government offices, if we have a way to, sorry, let me circle back to one part in the video. You had a close-up of a picture of Marco Lopez, and he has this campaign going about to watch the roads like your kids are playing on it. If we have something even bigger through Vision Zero that is being able to be shared throughout Central Florida, as far as yard signs, any kind of media or marketing whatsoever, I think it really could catch fire on a really base level. So I think casting a really wide net, having these kind of videos on airwaves, in the public eye, I think that's something that will really just catch fire. And that's my 1 point.
Well, we do have a whole communications team and a communication consultant working on just those approaches. And everything that we do at the regional level then is shared down at the county and city levels as well, where there you really get the hyper localized connections of knowing what community organizations tend to be most active and most receptive. So we really have a unique opportunity, because we're doing things at all government levels, to really reach out and hit a lot of the community with the important messaging.
Very good. Okay, we're gonna move on to this side, and we gotta roll it. Ms. Mormon, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. I definitely will be sharing the video that you guys created. I do feel the impact, and I think that all of us need to put it on our social media to make sure that people are seeing it. My question is relative to the statistics. 41% of traffic deaths occur on 2% of the roads. Are those 2% of roads identified on the website? How do we know what those roads are?
Yes, well, that is the high injury network.
But does it list out, like in Orange County, you can see that Dr. Phillips and
Yes.
Conroy? Okay.
We have that. It's not published yet, but it's coming within this week or next week.
Okay. And it'll be available on the website.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and you'll be able to actually look at the map and click on the map and find out what the statistics are for a particular stretch of road.
Ms. Council, you recognized.
How are you? One of the questions I would have is similar to Mr. Pilgrim. how is the data? Who is inputting the data, the current data? Like, there was a horrible crash on the same block that I keep complaining about, Marigold and Ponciana, where September 3rd, it took 3 children and a grandmother completely out. Now, on Sunday night at 12:03, same corner, right down the block, took out a SUV, took out a motorcyclist, and they all went on fire. This is the same corner that I keep complaining about. Now, my thing is, who's inputting all of this into the Vision Zero website? And then is there also on that website a resource guide of like Best Foot Forward and all the organizations that participate with safety?
Yeah.
Question.
So first part of that is, so law enforcement produces a crash report anytime a motor vehicle is involved in a crash. All of those go into a system called Signal 4 Analytics. That's a statewide crash database. And so that's what we're using. That's what all the data that you saw there on the hub site is coming from Signal 4. We have to do some processing on it to clean some things up and improve accuracy. And so that data is going into Signal 4 on a continuous basis. And we have access to crashes as recent as like 70 days back. And then local law enforcement has that information continuously because they're the ones that are inputting it. So yeah, so that the data is there. So then the question is, you know, how do we?
On a daily basis, as the crash happens, it goes into the system.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, there's some time lag, but and it varies, but yes.
Do you have available resources on that same page for if somebody goes on and they want to look up, you know, bike safety organizations, like anything that's pertaining, that's a resource number that could be utilized for, you know, things like this?
Yeah.
Like,
So all of that is going into the hub site.
okay.
There's that resources
Yes.
panel, which has about a dozen sections of different types of information that people
Awesome.
can.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Webster.
Hopefully I'll be brief. How does transit, bus and rail, play into helping to keep people safe? Bicycle, pedestrian, vehicles. We just don't hear very much about transit, and I think it plays big, and we should be investing more in transit.
Yeah. Well, certainly the however many 30, 40 people that you can fit on a transit bus are going to be much safer when they're on that bus than if they're in a private automobile or walking per cycle.
That's moving parts.
Right. And you've got a professional driver you know, involved. And so the downside is that those pedestrians and cyclists to get to the bus very often have to cross a 4 or 6 lane highway with high speed traffic. And that's, again, where we tend to see most of our pedestrian crashes. So it's a mixed bag. That's obviously we want to improve transit, but at the same time, we also need to be improving the safety of those corridors for people to get to that transit.
But maybe we need to be thinking more about transit and not widening our roads so wide that people can't get across them safely. Just my biased opinion.
Okay. Last one right here, because I'm the interim chair.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I actually was going to hold my comments. I don't want to prolong the meeting. However, Ms. Council mentions the 4-way stop right down there by my grandkids. Grandmother, 3 grandkids were, you know, killed by a 15-year-old joyriding with his friends. What happened to the 15-year-old? What were the consequences of that? Judy's nephew was killed. My brother-in-law was killed on a motorcycle. The young girls never attended a court date. Okay, so my thought is that's a big component. Mr. Batla has stepped out for a second. He mentioned he had a question about cause, and your response was, you know, cause belongs in the courtroom. I'm wondering where exactly are those folks in this process? Because that seems to be a big component of this is, these people are, they've got their head in their phone or they're doing whatever. There are consequences to their actions, and it just doesn't seem that that really is much unless they're driving in Tom's Tesla with the self-driving, whatever. But are they a part of this process? I mean, do we have anybody? And this is not an indictment of law enforcement. They can only enforce what the laws are. So what's the other side of that? Do we have anybody from that side of the table that's involved in this process?
No,
Or is that a too big of a question to solve today, I guess?
It is a big question, but I can give you some perspective on it. So first off, there's what are the consequences? And that's really kind of a state level, what do statutes say? Unfortunately, if you routine careless driving that results in a death, there's really no special consequences. If it's egregious, if it's aggressive or alcohol or something like that, then we get moved from civil to criminal cases. And so that's a question for where does that line shift at the legislative level. Also, I would say when I talk about mistakes, to me, being distracted is not really, that's not a mistake. That's a choice. Driving, speeding egregiously, is a choice. To me, a mistake is misjudging the speed of an approaching vehicle, right? Or having a blind spot or something like that. Obviously, there's gray areas between them. So no, we don't forgive every fault, and then there are certain behaviors absolutely that we can't tolerate and that we have to minimize as much as we can. So there's a balance there.
Recently, there was a family in an Uber where a 5-year-old child died. Who remembers that one? Just prior to Thanksgiving. Remember that one?
Here.
Yeah, it was here locally in like Orange County. My wife and I delivered Thanksgiving dinner to that family. So we appreciate the work that's going on that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Next, we have a presentation from Mr. Alex Track of Metro Plan Orlando, who will give us some information about the urban area boundary smoothing process. Alex, you have our attention.
And talk about a process that we enter into, a very prescribed process, a federally regulated process, which is identifying, adjusting, but what we call smoothing our census urban area boundary. So again, every 10 years following the census, among other things, MPOs have to do 3 core items. One is our board has to approve an apportionment plan that looks at the voting membership and participation of our governing board. Our board did that earlier this year. Another item is identifying and approving our metropolitan planning area. So it's probably another new term for many of you. Our metropolitan planning area, and like all MPOs in the state of Florida, are the counties in which they operate in. So we are the MPO for Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. But we're also the MPO for census designated urbanized areas. And currently we're the MPO for the Orlando and the Kissimmee urbanized areas. So we're now at this step in the process of looking at that third bullet, that census urban area boundary for the Orlando and Kissimmee urbanized areas. And within the latitude provided in federal law, we're adjusting that boundary in cooperation with our local agency partners consistent with their comp plan. So a little bit of a background about the process. The United States Census Bureau, our nation's demographers, identified a means of establishing urbanized areas. They are kind of the agency that really dictates the definition of urbanized areas, and they help Congress allocate funds and develop programs based on urban populations and rural populations. So that's primarily the federal government's purview in this, and also as it relates to federal eligibility for projects within those urbanized areas. So, the census took place in 2020. The U.S. Census Bureau did change their definition methodology for identifying urbanized areas. They went from a population density to a housing density. It's a lot easier to count houses than it is people on a decennial basis, but also annually or semi-frequently. So they changed that methodology, and when you change a method, you get different outcomes. So we did see some different changes. We saw areas that we had identified as urban that, based on the new method, are no longer urban. But this is our step in the process to work with our local partners to smooth that, adjust that boundary, to make it align with our comprehensive local plans. So the census took a stab at identifying the urban boundary using that nationwide formula. So they look at Orlando the same way they look at Ames, Iowa, the metropolitan area in Iowa. So they're using that same definition, that same formula to identify an urbanized area. And then step 2 through 5 or 2 through 4 is really where the latitude is provided by the Census Bureau and the U.S. Department of Transportation. And that's in smoothing that boundary. So we're able to look at those local plans and make adjustments as long as we're consistent with comp plans. DOT looked at the boundary and made some proposed recommendations using property appraiser parcel data. They provided that to my team. We looked at it and made some other adjustments based on some of the information and coordination that we have with our local partners. So we expanded that boundary outward to include other areas within our local government's urban growth boundaries and service provision areas. And then over the past 30 days, I've been working directly with all of our local government partners, one-on-one with the counties and cities for those jurisdictions impacted, looking at their local plans and making sure that our adjustments align with their local adopted plans. So after we go through all that process, we then take it back to our board and to you for approval, which our goal is to take that to you in your January, but our board's February cycle. Important to note, and as I mentioned kind of in my preface, this process really focuses around funding as it relates to Metro Plan Orlando, funding eligibility for our urbanized area Metro Plan Orlando funds. We call them, TMA or SU funds, or Transportation or Alternative Urban Funds, or our Carbon Reduction Urban Area Funds. Projects have to be in an urbanized area to receive urban area funds. It's as simple as that. Something to note, though, as part of this smoothing process, it's not a way to get more money. So the census definition in the area delineated by the census determines the urban area population for purposes of formula, for funding formulas. But as we smooth out, of course, more people and houses may come into the urbanized area, but it doesn't necessarily give us more money. So you don't get to manipulate or game the system to generate more funds for your region. And then the last bullet's really important to note, especially to you as local citizens, but also to our board and other elected bodies, is this national designation, this national boundary does not supersede, does not take away from any local government comprehensive or service planning authority. So this is another boundary focused around transportation funding eligibility, but also for different FEMA reimbursements in those natural disasters. So I mentioned I've been working really closely with our local government partners. We have received feedback, and I've had really one-on-one meetings with each of the jurisdictions that you see on this list. At the same time, I'm working with our partners in Lake County because we do have a shared urbanized area. The Orlando urbanized area actually goes into the Claremont area, or the Claremont, Mascot, Groveland, Mineola area, and has so for 20 years. So we work closely with them through a coordinated process to make those adjustments. So we've been working closely with them. Moving forward, though, we did wrap up our local agency comment period. Really a really productive experience. Built a lot of consensus around the changes, the limitations, but also heard from our local partners what the importance of rural settlements and really drawing that line with real caution. So, our local agencies are really well aware of citizens' desire for urbanized areas, but also for the needs of rural and transitioning areas. So we're in the process of documenting all of that feedback, our comment and response process. we're meeting here in a couple of weeks with DOT to make sure everything's kosher as it relates to the state, make sure they don't have any heartburn over any of the adjustments that were made. And then we'll, as I mentioned before, we're going to be taking this to you and our board during your January, February cycle. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Very good. Pretty straightforward.
Appreciate your
Thank you
time.
so
Thank
much,
you.
Mr. Tarver. Ms. Pizzo.
Very quick question, because I know we're running short. With the local governments that you had met with, I did not see Altamont Springs and Longwood on that list. Is that because there was not a significant change?
Yeah,
in their
there,
growth?
so when you look at our urbanized areas, the impacts are going to be in the areas on the fringe or on the transition because, you know, core cities, so if you're on the I-4 corridor, there's really no impact. You're always going to be in the urbanized area because of that urban nucleus, kind of the core growth, where it's really smoothing around the boundaries. So the jurisdictions or the counties who obviously have rural areas or transitioning areas within the counties, but also agency jurisdictions that are on, you know, the west side or the east side or the south side of our entire metropolitan planning area. So if you're a core municipality, like Winter Park provided comment just out of kind of the, you know, as an active participant in our process, but they really didn't have a vested interest or any kind of impact because they're always going to be urban no matter what the definition is. And suburban is urban for purposes of for federal government.
Okay, excellent as always. Thank you, Mr. Tarver.
Sure, certainly.
Next, we have a presentation from Ms. Laura Balls from Metro Plan Orlando, who will give us some information about the FTE tentative work program. About you.
Sorry.
The electric vehicle readiness study.
Recur.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So Mr. Hill is up in DC the next couple of days representing Metro Plan Orlando at a Tismo Pier Exchange. So I'm so happy to be with you this morning and talk a little bit about the electric vehicle or EV readiness study that we have underway. And I'm going to actually kick off by asking the same question that Eric asked at our TAC and Tismo committee meetings last week. How many of you currently own electric vehicles?
None of us. No one here has an electric vehicle.
Oh, hello. Hello.
Okay, so we know Tom, the mic back there. Oh, okay, all right. Very good. So I think you guys are winning so far from the 3 committees that we presented at. But we expect in the next 5 years, like if I ask this question 5 years from now, expect a lot more hands to go up. And so that's why we feel like this is a timely place for us to do this sort of study. There is no FHWA or federal requirement for Metro Plan Orlando or any other MPO really to get involved in the EV planning process. But as an administrator of funds and with the amount of grant funding that's being made available in this space, we think that it behooves us to be an active participant rather in EV readiness. So we have kicked off this readiness study just a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be about a 12-month study. And there are really 4 or 5 key objectives for the study, including providing background information on EV technologies, assessing existing conditions for EV charging and support equipment, and then thinking about evaluating our future needs for EV readiness, making some recommendations for policies and regulations that our local agencies can consider as they start to develop and implement their platforms for supporting EV readiness. Coordinating with our utility owners to think about what types of upgrades the region's power supply may need to meet charging demands, and then developing a framework for planning and evaluation moving forward. So Mr. Hill provided me with 1 slide to go over everything that is covered under the scope of work. And so what is shown on the slide are the 5 main tasks that are part of the scope of work. The other 2 are more administrative. So the first one up there is our topic-specific workshops. Many of you who are familiar with the studies that we do know that we tend to convene steering committees that sort of serve throughout the life of many of our studies. And we're switching that up a little bit for this particular one. And we're instead going to convene a series of sort of topic-specific workshops that are going to help us think about some of the tasks that are part of this study. We're still in flux about if we're going to be sending out invitations or sort of opening it up to have people just volunteer to be a part of the workshops, but we're expecting to see representatives from our advisory committees, local agency partners, some industry partners that we think will have some expertise to share with us as we move through the study. And some of the things that we expect to be focusing on the workshops include things like the market demand analysis, the siting analysis, which is really under number 3 there, methods for public outreach, and our goals and performance measures as we start to think about that evaluation monitoring piece of things. Looking at the second bullet point, which is the electric vehicle supply and equipment assessments. Some of the things that we'll be doing as a part of that task include first evaluating the existing supply of EVs. We know that there are different types of electric vehicles right now. We'll be looking at the current and sort of historic adoption rates and thinking about how we expect that to change moving forward. We will also be thinking about how EVs impact both infrastructure and the environment differently than gas-powered vehicles. We know that EVs tend to be heavier, as a for instance, which does have some impact on our roadways. As a part of this task, we'll be also looking at issues related to how well existing charging infrastructure is functioning currently. We know there's a lot of, or there is some infrastructure that's out there now, and our Tesla chargers tend to function pretty well, but some of the others, I'm sure we've all heard some stories here and there about how there are some difficulties sometimes within maintenance, and whether or not they're functioning properly. And then we'll be doing a summary of federal, state, and local policies that currently exist in the EV space. Moving on to the charging infrastructure analysis task, we will first be looking at the existing supply of public charging infrastructure in the region. We know that one of the barriers to entry for EV ownership, in addition to the cost for purchasing a vehicle, is concerns about being able to charge vehicles both for daily use and then also for long distance trips. And so we'll be looking at what's currently existing, what is planned. We know that FDOT has done a statewide plan for where they will have facilities on the state network, and we're going to be sort of coming in to look at that on the rest of the system. At this time, the largest proportion of EV owners tend to be more on the affluent side, and so they're able to charge their vehicles at home. But as we start to see that EV adoption rate uptick and we have more users that are perhaps in multifamily housing, we'll have to think about where there's public infrastructure that can make sure that they're able to charge their vehicles and that we have the proper support for them. Looking at the public outreach piece of things, we'll define exactly what that's going to look like as we go through some of those topic specific workshops, but really what we're planning to focus on is more education about what EVs are, where there is existing infrastructure, and the types of things that we think that people may have questions about as they're starting to think about whether or not they'll be buying an EV in the future. And then for planning and monitoring, this task can include developing a methodology for monitoring our progress moving forward, really. So as I mentioned, this will be about a 12-month study, so we'll keep you apprised of our progress as we move forward, and we'll likely be coming back in the fall sometime to talk about some of our findings. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Very good. We'll start right here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question. You mentioned EVs tend to be, for the affluent, loose terms. Does micro-mobility devices, do you include any of that in your EV? Or, if you could expound on that, I mean, because it just seems when you bring that into the conversation, that kind of, brings that out of just the affluent and to everybody. So
that is an excellent question. And we actually had a similar one at our TAC committee about how we were thinking about not just micromobility, but also transit vehicles and electric bikes, micromobility. And the initial scope was more focused on vehicles, making sure that we have sufficient charging and supply for vehicles. But I think that we will be opening it up perhaps at one of the topic specific workshops to think more broadly about how we can make sure that we're providing charging for micromobility and other modes that may use electricity rather to power. And one thing of note is I know City of Orlando has done some work already in this space and has seen that there is some economies of scale for providing mobility hubs and charging hubs. And so that may be something that we think about more deeply as part of the study.
Thank you.
I want to ask that we could please ask them really quick because we have another presentation. Mr. Pegram, recognize.
Just curious if that is truly the focus of the study, at least scope wise, is around, large automobiles that use electricity. Plug-in hybrids, a lot of people don't go full electric because they can do their commute to work as electric. So I wonder kind of how that classifies in here, if it's not a fully electric vehicle, but it uses that system.
Looking at those different types of electric vehicles,
Yeah.
that is already contemplated in the scope. So we'll
And
be thinking
then
about that.
the piece I didn't see out here is
Mhm.
policy wise. So like for ADA in the design and codes, there's a certain percentage of parking that's allocated for ADA. When I think of municipalities in the area that really you could argue would be a test bed from a policy standpoint, the airport has 22,000 parking spaces. So what's the appropriate percent? If it's 2%, that's 400 charging stations just from a policy standpoint. Does that align with like what the airport is actually seeing? So I didn't see that kind of as a note. So I thought the fact that they're a municipality that has that much parking, that they would be a good partner to kind of explore policy.
I absolutely agree with you. They're one that I think we'll try to engage as one of the public, or sorry, topic specific workshop participants, because you're right, there are many parking spaces there, and talking about how they're thinking about moving forward to support these types of vehicles, I think will be important. From a policies perspective, more globally, that is included in the scope. We'll be looking at what other communities are doing, both locally throughout the state and then nationally, and looking for best practices that we can sort of bring to our agency partners to talk through what makes the most sense in this region.
Okay, Ms. White and Ms. Gus, we'll have to shut this one down.
Thank you, Laura. So the users, the less affluent renters, the last time I rented a car from Avis, the increasing fleet includes a Tesla. So instead of just thinking of the owner, if your question has started out with how many use or drive a Tesla, my hand would have been included, and I could tell you all of the stories that I have of renting a Tesla and having no idea what to do with the Tesla. And the Avis rep just telling me the car will tell you. Well, the car did not tell me that my drive to Tallahassee included a stop in a far off place behind a Target halfway through at a city that I normally would not have stopped at. So you may want to include the users as being renters, and another population are the Uber drivers, because every time I stop, I make friends while I'm charging, and it's a Uber driver who is using a Tesla from the rental company to do his business, but he's not an owner.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. White. That's an excellent point, because you're right, the sort of the rental market are among the highest proportion of EV users at this point. And some of you may have seen, I've seen a couple of articles here recently about people sort of getting surprised with the only vehicles being left on a rental lot being EVs and sort of having to navigate through that space. So we will make sure we include that. Thank you.
Ms. Gus.
Well, I'm glad that Ms. White made that comment right before, because that highlighted a lot of things. I mean, we have a lot of tourists that are coming here, so the essential people that are on our main roadways is a good percentage of our tourists. So being able to accommodate for them is also very important. I did want to mention, I'm not sure if that's going to be included in your study, but the city of Kissimmee, we have a program called Freebie. So it is a Tesla and it goes around, it's a free program. It's funded by the commission. And everybody is able to use this freebie. And I know personally, at least 15 people who use this very frequently. So even though they're not owners, that's a study I think that will be important. I just feel like we do need to focus on public transit when it comes to putting money and funding into these EVs, because that way we kind of relieve what's going on with consumers trying to find charging stations. It's more commercialized. So, you know, the people who have their business in that, they can kind of handle that. And then everybody else kind of just enjoy the benefits of that. I do feel like it is something that's really important, but I do think that the scope of public transit and that movement is really what we need to highlight.
Thank you. It's a great perspective. And I will note that we found out recently that Osceola County, for those of you who are in that area, are actually doing their own EV readiness study as well. So we'll be coordinating pretty closely with them.
Very good. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Finally, we're going to hear from Mr. Patrick Henza regarding Bike Walk Central Florida. Sorry we have crunched your time down so much.
It's okay. I totally understand.
I think we have about 10 minutes for your presentation and questions.
Yes. And with that said, I would love to prioritize your questions, truth be told. I have to imagine at this point that many members of the committee here are very familiar with our organization, Bike Walk Central Florida, and the Best Foot Forward program that we administer. So if you'll forgive me, I'll probably skip over a few of the little details and we can hit them back in questions.
And we know this is a very interesting subject for us.
Yes, so my name is Patrick Pamza. This is the first time I am presenting to this committee. I'm the programs director at Bike Walk Central Florida. I've been in that position for about a year. I was on the board of directors for 2 years prior to that. My background is urban planning. I also teach at UCF downtown in the master's program, and I worked for a local consulting firm for about 18 years. So this has been a really fantastic transition for me, and it's a topic and a subject and an activity that I'm very, very passionate about. So I'm here today to give you all an update for the Best Foot Forward program. As a programs director, I provide oversight and strategic direction for all of our programs, and the Best Foot Forward program is our largest program to date. MetroPlan being a very, very valued partner that has really enabled and empowered this program through the funding agreement that we're so grateful for. So I'm here to provide you an update today on our annual activities, et cetera. So these are sort of high level, and I'm going to kind of run through these and invite any comments or questions that you may have. So to date, 2012 to now, this is the tenure so far of the program running, and we're up to almost 13,000 total citations and warnings and 680 enforcement details in that enforcement E. On the engineering side, we have monitored 326 crosswalks across the Orange, Osceola, and Seminole County region, and we've accomplished 841 presentations and events. This is community education, it's participation in neighborhood groups, in working groups, et cetera. This is how we make our impact in the program. And speaking of that impact, we've put together this graph here to kind of draw some parallels with a lot of the data that you all are seeing now with all of these Vision Zero efforts. We're tracking data over time, and what you can see here are bike and ped deaths and incapacitating injuries per 100,000 population since 2012 to date in the blue bars. And as you see the trends, these are the same trends that you're going to be seeing when you're looking at our Vision Zero action plans from our counties and from MetroPlan. We see the ebbs and flows of this. We wanted to take a look at this specifically in relation to our program activities with Best Foot Forward. So the percent of drivers yielding to pedestrians at program crosswalks is there in the line on that chart. And you can see that sort of inverse relationship that as through our program data collection, we see more and more drivers yielding to pedestrians at our program crosswalks. Those deaths and incapacitating injuries per 100,000 are falling down. Now, obviously, we're not here to say that it's us. We did it, right? We're a small part of this puzzle, but it is encouraging to see that this relationship exists. And so we wanted to share that with you. So now talking about the fiscal year of 23 in those categories, 92 events and presentations. Really what I want to focus on here are some of the big takeaways. We're reaching people. 10,000 people reached through our direct education and community outreach efforts. Over 10,000 pieces of resources distributed. These are educational materials. These are things that help people make the right decisions in their daily efforts and spread messaging along. On the enforcement side, we work with our 11 law enforcement partners. We've accomplished 71 crosswalk details in that fiscal year, totaling 522 crosswalk warnings and 315 citations. As you may know, it's the law enforcement agency's decision whether they write a citation or a warning. It is not their decision whether or not they hand out our educational material. That's a requirement, and that means that everybody is getting education regardless of whether they're walking away with a fine or not, and that's very important to us. On the engineering and evaluation side, we had 76 crosswalks in the program across the city, the municipal partners and the county partners in the last fiscal year. We did 379 data collection efforts there, and a total of 7 significant engineering improvements were implemented by our partners. So we have also engaged in some special projects. Members of our staff, Emily, our executive director, who's on maternity leave still, by the way, She participated in a few meetings, Eagle Circle pedestrian safety improvements. They did a walking audit out there. We've done presentations to elected officials in Apopka and Seminole County. We're moving on. We're continuing to develop these relationships. These relationships are so important to us because as an advocacy organization, you know, you can accomplish so much through advocacy, but there's so much more that you can accomplish with a seat at the table. And we're very grateful to have those relationships. Our Best Foot Forward Regional Summit, speaking of relationships, this is our way of kind of giving back to our coalition as a community. We like to bring them together. And this kind of serves as our fourth quarter coalition meeting. It's in person, and we turn it into a little bit of a awards banquet and a workshop. We had exercises. We had a keynote speaker, Brandy Miklas, came and talked to us about the Tampa Moves effort in terms of pedestrian safety. We had speakers, Gary Huttman, Commissioner Uribe, and we gave away awards. And this is the way that we can recognize those exemplary efforts in championing pedestrian and bicycle safety for those who walk, bike, and roll. We had a great panel discussion. We had law enforcement, Sergeant Harmon, Isai Chavez from Wasilla County on the engineering side, Jojo Sturm, who at the time was with Seminole County Crossing Guards, spoke toward education, and it really fostered some great communication. Having all of those people in the same room at the same time is really fantastic. You get to cross a lot of boundaries and break down silos. Of course, we hold our stakeholder meetings. We've done a lot of crosswalk site visits directly with our stakeholders to put boots on the ground and eyes on the issues and opportunities. And we did complete our round of crosswalk workshops for selecting crosswalks for the next fiscal year of the program. We've got a lot that are staying in the program. We've got some new ones that we want to put some fresh eyes and efforts into. Program-wide, in terms of enforcement, we did them quarterly. I want to highlight media and exposure at this point. Organizationally, we made a decision this year to bring in a public relations firm and a marketing firm to handle these items for us. And we have seen some market improvements in the exposure that our programs are getting, Best Foot Forward included. I can say I went out to a crosswalk detail during one of these high visibility enforcements. I was 5 minutes away. I was going to be 10 minutes early. And I got a phone call from one of my staff members that was already there that said, there are 4 news outlets that are ready to interview as soon as you get here. And I like that problem. That's fantastic. So I would cross the street with law enforcement, then I'd come back and I'd do a spot on the 30-minute, I'd do a live spot, and then I'd cross the street for 20 more minutes. I'd come off and do another interview. It was fantastic. I love that we're getting this exposure for the program and the partners. I will kind of skip through some of these pictures and get back to some content. So here I want to talk about really outcomes and results. We're going to highlight a couple specific items here in the categories. First and foremost, in enforcement, we're recognizing where the benefits lie across that engineering, enforcement, and evaluation and education efforts. And we wanted to take a look at and share with you how each one of these can be individually beneficial, and then of course, how they come together as a package to have compounding impacts and effects. So within enforcement, a couple examples here. In Seminole County, the Sheriff's Office conducted 3 enforcement operations at this particular crosswalk at Eagle Circle and Eagle Boulevard. If we split the data in half, 46% was the average driver yield rate before those enforcements. And during the last half of the year, that raised to 58%. Now, these are somewhat isolated efforts. There were no engineering improvements during this period of time, and we see this increase. We see this in a couple of different places. We've highlighted a few examples here. Buttinger Avenue and Peghorn Way in St. Cloud, through the same enforcement effort, raised from an average yield rate of 24% to 57%. They didn't change anything. This is just about education, right? These are repeat users. This is very close to a school. It's the same people driving through here over and over and again. You educate them. And what this is proving to us is that you do affect behavioral change. That's a big part of the Best Foot Forward program. Another one there in Apopka went from 49% to 73%. One more, Dean Road and Timber Oaks started at 5% average driver yield rate for our data collection team. Which is, to be frank, absolutely appalling. We've got it up to, in the second half of the year, 20%. Still not a great number. And we're gonna be working with our partners to say, okay, now let's move on to these other pieces, engineering, low-cost engineering improvements, et cetera, roadway reconfigurations. Let's keep getting this number up. One more example, Oak and Emory in Kissimmee went from 16% to 39%. I already went over the education numbers, so I'm going to kind of just scroll through our photos here. Our social media impressions likewise are also growing quite a bit. We're very, very strategically focused on growing our audience so that we can continue to share our messaging. It's a very efficient method of education when you can have 107,000 total impressions over 8,000 unique engagements without ever actually stepping foot out of the door. On the engineering side, so let's take a look at some of these impacts when we actually do make some infrastructure and low-cost engineering changes here. In Kissimmee at Mill Run Road and Mill Slough Road, they made some very sort of light changes. You'll see there in the before and after pictures. In the after picture, we have those sort of shark's teeth advanced warning pavement markings along with the signage. Okay. This went from a 26% yield rate to a 69% yield rate after that effort. They also installed an RRFB. These are really, really big improvements. Melody Lane and Cypress Way in Castleberry went from 36 to 75% simply with the addition of adding center stripes, a stop bar, and one of the in-street paddle signs, that sort of gateway treatment. This is an interesting cross-section of users here. We have light industrial use, auto shops, and then we have a huge Target just on the other side of this, crosswalks. So we have pedestrians of all ages and abilities coming through here. We have employees, we have the elderly, we have young people on bicycles. I was out here specifically at an enforcement operation. What a great improvement there, really, with a very, very small investment there. Thacker and Kissimmee Trail in Kissimmee started at 38%. They did similar advanced warning pavement markings and signage. They restriped that crosswalk with a much more recognizable special emphasis ladder, and that went from 38% to 68%. The RRFB there also implemented. We all know the success stories from those flashing beacons. One more in Oakland, the roundabout project at 64% and 80%. So I'm going to keep going through here, and I can kind of wrap this up because I'd like to try to take an opportunity to just kind of talk a little bit about what Bike Walk continues to do, because it's these partnerships that allows us to continue to work in the community and leverage those relationships. We also worked with the POPCA to do an active transportation network study. Our Healthy West Orange program is working out in West Orange County to promote, activate, and enhance trail systems. And of course, we had our Bike 5 event, which was hugely successful this year as well. All of these things work together with the partners that are here in the room today, with our partners that are funding partners as well. And first and foremost, I thank MetroPlan as an organization for empowering us. And I hope that you are very happy with our progress today and our continued efforts in the Best Foot Forward program.
Absolutely have to get in for this. That was a great presentation. Fantastic. Mr. Pegram.
Thank you. So really appreciate the retrospective. I think a lot of time in this committee, we look forward, prioritize project list, 5-year work plan, 2040, 2045. So really appreciate that we can look back and what was done retrospectively and what worked, what didn't work, and those percentages. For those projects, kind of building on Ms. Council's concerns and what the chair brought up about areas that they've seen, how are we prioritizing within the jurisdictions? Is it driven by some of the data that Mike's collecting, or is it being driven by the commissioners of like, this is where my constituents are complaining? Like, how are we prioritizing where and of what magnitude to make those improvements?
That's a great question. What I would say simply is that it is not our organization. It is not Bike Walk Central Florida that is driving the crosswalk selection process. We host a workshop for each one of our partners, municipal and county partners, toward the end of the fiscal year, and it is their decision. We provide them with the data that we have on hand, right? And we might advise on it, But they are working through their processes. And I think more often than not, that you'll find that they're utilizing the same resources that Mike and the team are using, and the same data sources. Their information from the law enforcement partners, we pass on as much information that we get from the community as possible. So it's a multifaceted sort of decision-making tree. But I do want to be explicit in saying this is not our decision. That lies with the partners.
Yeah. In the back, Ms. White.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I didn't see yours.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
You answered my previous question. Thank you. One question I saw that you did not you, but the partners, enforcement in April when school is in, and then it was followed up in July when school is out. Why are you not looking at the same time? When are you doing like April of 2024, then coming back in April in 2020? The following year, a month, and when the months are not equal, school is in, school is out, there's an expectation that the driving behaviors will change.
Right. No, thank you very much for that question. I appreciate it. Our enforcement activities are scheduled quarterly, okay? And we try and theme them with what's going on. So a lot of the times you'll see the April one is a back to school sort of theme, and we focus on crosswalks that are very close to schools, or maybe within a quarter mile of schools or trails. Okay. The specific dates are very difficult to always have at the same time, because we rely on our law enforcement partners and their availability to really make these happen. So we shoot for windows. We've recently increased that from a 2-day window to a 2-week window, which has been very well received by the law enforcement partners. It gives them a lot more flexibility. But as such, it does result in a little bit of variability in exactly when those are happening.
Okay, Mr. Batman.
So how can a private business get crosswalks installed outside of their property? How do we go about getting a public-private partnership?
Well, first I will say that what I'm about to say, I do not want to be construed as anything other than my opinion. I would say what I would think would be the best process there is that if a private entity or a private organization felt that there was a need for a crosswalk on a public facility or roadway, my advice would be to start a conversation with the managing entity of the roadway. And from there, I think all the processes are in place to make it happen, honestly.
Okay. Ms. Mott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Penza. Great presentation. My question is centered around the fact that you said you all partnered with another organization, with the marketing group. Is that something they intend to keep ongoing?
Yes, organizationally, that relationship that we've established, the name of the company is called Boardroom PR. That is a service group that is providing services to Bike Walk Central Florida, the nonprofit organization. They provide services across all of our programs. So this is not a specific best foot forward type of partnership. It is purely an organizational contract that we have with them to provide services.
Well, good. It's great to hear that they intend to continue that, considering, they're garnering those types of decreases by creating awareness. That's like a no-brainer. They must keep something like that. So I would implore you all to keep that. Thank you. That concludes my question.
Ms. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Patrick. Good seeing you again. We work together with Hannibal Square Community Land Trust. So good to see the work that you're doing now with Best Foot Forward. So my question is back to Mike's presentation, where 41% of the traffic deaths are taking place on 2% of the roads. Are you guys working together in those specific areas to make sure that the awareness is there, so that streets like Marigold in Poinciana are being, there's a lot of focus and a lot of awareness being created in those spaces?
This is a great question. And I would say that I will say honestly, I think that the program and the way that it's designed is probably more well equipped to provide educational messages along some of those, because along with that 2% of roads, if you recall, a lot of those are state facilities, right? And so There are some constraints we work with within the program. For instance, in the interest of the safety of our data collectors and the enforceability of a crosswalk, roads above 45-mile-an-hour speed limits, limited access roadways, those are not a part of our program. Most of them. And unfortunately, that is where you start to see a disproportionately large number of those KSIs. So I do think that we're doing a fairly good job, to be honest, especially at the county level, at the municipal level, a lot of these problem areas. But within education, there's not really any boundaries there. We can reach anybody anywhere, you know, so.
Okay, Ms. Council.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you do. I have to say, I kind of feel that I'm the one that got the best foot forward, because you guys came out to numerous events in Ponciana, Kissimmee, from farmers markets to backpack giveaways. They gave out helmets, they gave out reflectors, they gave out education. And that's what we need in communities like I'm in. You know, we have well over 100,000 people that have moved in the area of Ponciana, Kissimmee in the past 2 years, and the traffic has become something on another level. Miss Ronnie Woods, when she goes to an event, she is one of the most amazing employees that you can possibly have, because she gets everybody interested. And it's wonderful when you have somebody come from an organization like yourself into inner city community where people are just, you know, and they're actually excited to bring their kid and stand in an hour line for a helmet, because the lady that's there is all about her business. And I love your organization. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Silas, you good down there? Okay. Thank you for all you do. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our presentations. There are several items on the general information tab and tab 3 in your agenda packets. Our next in-person CAC meeting will be January 24th of 2024. The remainder of the meetings for 2024 are listed in the agenda, and you have a full draft 2024 meeting calendar in tab 3 of your agenda packets. Please remember to RSVP so that we're not sweating before the meetings. Okay. The next Metro Plan Orlando board meeting will be on December 13th. At this time, do we have any committee members who would like to make final comments? Ms. Mott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to again, thank you, Chairman Campbell, for your exemplary leadership. You did an extraordinary job. I understand. I understand the dedication, sacrifice, and commitment to serving in that capacity, and you've done that for the past 4 years. So thank you again for your leadership.
Thank you. My pleasure to serve you. Mr. Peeble.
Just a reminder for the virtual option for the Sunshine Corridor tonight. I believe it's 5:30 to 7:30. I believe you have to sign up on DOT's website in advance to get a link. So that is tonight, and there's the in-person sessions tonight and tomorrow. And for those that aren't Orange County residents, just kind of understand the opportunity here with this project is, while they may be focusing in Orange County, you know, it's kind of that initial operating service that could extend beyond. So for areas like Osceola that could potentially benefit from this in the I-4 corridor long-term, just because you put tracks for intercity doesn't mean it can't extend as commuter service long-term. So while it may be Orange County focused right now, appreciate everyone's thoughts and feedback on a potential for a major new corridor in the Central Florida region.
Ms. Mormon, I missed you.
Oh, no worries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree with Ms. Mott. So thank you for everything you've done. I've enjoyed being a part of this committee since 2019. And as today's my last meeting, I just want to thank everybody for the knowledge sharing, because it's so important for people like me who are realtors and networking spaces to be able to share the opportunities that are taking place, the programming that's taking place, and the work that's being done to make sure that we're not only one of the best cities and regional areas, but one of the safest ones too. So thank you, guys.
Thank you for all you do. Ms. White?
Yes, I want to thank Metro Plan Orlando for providing the legislative position statements. As the immediate past president of the Florida Public Health Association, we rely on you all to to help us guide, because everything has a health impact. So for the other member organizations, if you have any legislative statements or guidance on how the Florida Public Health Association can look at advocacy, how whatever impacts health, please share those. I'd love to share those with the members of the Florida Public Health Association. Thank you.
Very good. You all set? Okay. We have now come to our second public comment period. If any members of the public wish to comment and are joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial *9 on your phone keypad. We will send you a prompt to unmute your microphone. After you are recognized, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 2 minutes, please. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who would like to make a comment?
Mr. Chair, we do not have any hands raised on the virtual side.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public attending who wish to make a comment today?
Mr. Chair, I've received no comments.
Okay. All right, so I'd just like to say thank you again, starting to the CAC liaison here at Metro Plan, who has been by our side all the way. And she works tireless to make sure everything works well. Thank you to all the members here and team members at Metro Plan for all they do as well. And most of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for your most precious asset, as I've called it. And what's that? That's your time. You give us your time. So we're grateful for that. I say congratulations again to Dr. Stevens and Ms. Council, our new leadership coming. I know we're going to be in great hands with all of that. And happy holidays to all of you. With that, I will say we are adjourned.
And you get to stay on the committee and just sit in the back. Stand your name card up on it.
There you go.
That'll be great. Oh, my goodness. Well, we had to finish.